through Sukuk, and we hardly see syndicated financing. Banks do not come in for long-term projects, given the enhanced liquidity and capital requirements. So the shift is already happening. And for the shift to happen from syndicated finance to infrastructure Sukuk, as I mentioned earlier, the key component is whether there is sufficient demand and depth in the institutional investor base market. So there must be clear direction in terms of developing the institutional investor base. So a lot of incentives can be given, and in many countries we have seen tax being used as a tool to develop institutional investor base. So for example, some countries give tax breaks for individuals to take, for example, life insurance or life takaful cover. So if people start taking life takaful cover, the life takaful industry will grow. Education takaful is another growth area where people can take long-term education policy for their children. That will again grow the demand for long-tenured assets, which would be the infrastructure Sukuk. Similarly, the private sector pension fund, the public sector pension fund must start allocating a certain amount to infrastructure Sukuk. So once we have incentivized the players to shift towards long-tenured assets, you will suddenly see the growth of the infrastructure Sukuk. So in markets like Malaysia, syndicated financing is typically used for a bridge, 12 to 18 months, and then the takeout is normally through a project finance Sukuk. And the last question on the Waqaf or development of the Waqaf asset through Sukuk, a classic example is Majlis Ugama Islam Singapura, which has used Waqaf land very effectively by redeveloping the Waqaf land into mixed commercial and residential developments using Sukuk without losing the Waqaf status. So a lot of people fear that if we use financing, then the state of the Waqaf will change. It will defeat the purpose of the Waqf. So we have seen many examples where the Waqf status remains, but it has been redeveloped. So if it's a Waqf khas for mosque, the fatwa can be given to redevelop into a Sharia-compliant commercial or mixed residential unit and rebuild the mosque on top. So you can still have the mosque, but the land will be developed with steady stream of revenue, not only to maintain the mosque, but also to conduct other charitable activities in accordance with the spirit of the Waqf itself. So there are many ways of using Sukuk to develop Waqf properties, but there must be a clear direction and leadership within the government, particularly using the Islamic religious departments to grow it. And Singapore is a classic example of how they have developed. And Malaysia also has many examples. So we can look at both these countries for some examples of how they have developed it. Thank you.
Libya is a founding member of ISIC. It can benefit from all services of ISIC. I did not understand what do you mean by subprime investment or however, there are many services ISIC can provide to enhance the risk. ISIC can provide insurance to anyone willing to invest in Libya. If the Libyans they want to go to invest overseas or in our member countries, they can get our guarantee or our protection. And we are encouraging contractors to come to Libya. We have many products which can suit the needs of Libya. If you need more information, you can visit us in our office in the ground floor. But I did not understand what is sub-primary investment or sub-investment. What do you mean by that?
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Thank you for answering part of my question. As Libya now, it is going in BBB, private-public partnership, and there is no more, Libya used to be before as state enterprises. Everything is government-owned 100%. But that's 42 years ago. Now time had changed, you know. So because of the changing that we are now having in Libya, especially, we're going to be the new capital of the world as we are based in North Africa. We are the gateway between Africa, Europe, and Asia. Libya is the #1 country in the world for solar power. For by 2050, the oil will be decreased and the solar power will be increased. We are the #1 country in the planet where we have the heart of the sun in Libya. So 300 kilometers square in the desert of Sabha is going to go
focus on
further.
the question, please.
Yes, I'm just trying to eliminate. Therefore, we are going into privatization. So you are not dealing with government. This is what I mean. We are mostly going for privatization, airport, seaport, and so on. My question to you, as Libya's member in 57, like you said, with the IDB Bank, is it possible for Isaac to cover the investment in Libya and also to cover our private funds? We are not short of funds. We are not asking for. We have surplus money all over the world to be reinvested. Thank you.
This is the basic mandate of ISIC, is to help and to enable its member countries to attract foreign investment. And any investors, any company with the government of Libya, or they want to privatize, they want to attract foreign investors, ISIC can protect foreign investors against the non-country risk of Libya. We can assure investors if they invested in Libya, they will be protected, they will be compensated in case of confiscation by Libyan government, in case of civil war, in case of breach of contract, in case of any restriction on transfer of currency. All these risks can be covered, and our instrument will help the investors to come to Libya.
Okay, I think you've covered that. Any other questions from the floor? Yes, one. And the two. Another one. Okay, three. So can we start with the I think on my left. Yes, please, brother. Please use your microphone. Introduce yourself as well.
Bismillah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
سأتكلم بلغة عربية. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أنا والسؤال سأتوجه إلى مبعوث لوزارة المالية إندونيسي.
Well, this is for the Ministry of Trade. What can you explain the Sukuk reserve? I think there's a reserve requirement. What kind of reserve and what is the reserve requirement?
Speak in bahasa Indonesia. At least I understand, a few others understand. And then cakap dalam bahasa Indonesia dan kita akan cuba jawab.
For Mr. Robert Pakpahan, I read that the retail Sukuk number 7 and number 8, the underlying asset. But what I would like to know more about the underlying asset for 008 Sukuk retail that was just issued a few months ago. Does this mean like the Gelora Bung Karno will become the underlying asset or what? Because in the bank, I see that the underlying asset is not very clear. Because the project in the national budget are a lot, where in Islam, we should eliminate a gharar so it can be our ambiguity. So at least it is much more detailed.
What do you think?
Thank you, Prof. Azmi. My question goes to Mr. Osama. My name is Yulizar Jamalin Sanrego from National Sharia Board. Pertaining recourse in the case of default to the Sukuk originator, could you please come back to the illustration which is trying to explain the business model, which is mostly goes to the ECF rule in terms of securing, I don't know, which is related to the issuer or to the investor. Thank you. And maybe you could explain what will be the akad from the picture. Thank you.
Third question. Do we have somebody else who wants to ask? Okay, yes, brother.
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum. Nama saya Taufik dari.
My name is Taufik from the Ministry of Finance. I would like to ask Mr. Robert about Sukuk and bonds. As you mentioned previously, the government is heavily relying on bonds and Sukuk. If later Sukuk and bonds, if there will be an overcrowding of bonds and Sukuk, and the bonds, corporate bonds and corporate Sukuks are not interesting for now, what is being offered by the government are not interesting. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, as usual, why don't we start from Brother Adil first and then we come this way.
It is a basic principle of insurance that the insurance company will compensate the policyholder against the loss which it may incur. And after compensating the policyholder, the insurance company will go against the defaulting party. Okay? In case of insurance, the policyholder is a SPV. It is holding the insurance policy on behalf of the policy of the Sukuk holders. Okay? If the originator, for example, in case of Ijara Sukuk, fails to pay the rentals, means that the SPV cannot distribute any part of the Sukuk to the Sukuk holders. Okay? And in this case, ISIC will intervene and it will compensate the SPV to enable it to pay the Sukuk holders. Okay? ISIC will redress the loss. After paying the SPV, ISIC will go against the obligor who defaults on its obligation. And in this case, it will be the originator or the member country. ISIC will go to recover the loss from its member countries who default on its obligations toward the SPV.
Okay, maybe if I can add a bit further to the question. The first question is about akad. What akad do you use between the SPV and ISAC for the insurance coverage? So that's the first one. Akad, the Sharia contract use.
The contract is an insurance contract. It's an insurance policy which ISIC will issue to the SPV. It's an insurance policy to cover the SPV against the non-payment risk of the originator. It's a simple insurance contract.
Brother Rafi? Okay, Pak Robert.
Okay, allow me to answer in English for everybody. Number one, regarding the underlying asset that used for the Sukuk Retail SR008. In every issuance of the government's Sukuk issuance, after we executed the issuance, we immediately would issue Ministry of Finance decree, which will list all the underlying assets specifically item by item. So regarding Sukuk Retail 008, also there is a list of, in a decree by the Minister of Finance, this is the underlying assets. In this case, a list of project specifically taken from the list taken from the 2016 budgets, not all of the infrastructure project, but some of them that they have been approved by DG budget. We will list that project as an underlying asset for Sukuk Retail. What are they? They are specifically, some of them would be arterial road development, railroad development, small airport, small seaport, that will be built for 2016. If at the end of 2016, some of these underlying asset that we will, that is used as an underlying, for some reasons, is not materialized, is not built by the governments, then we will amend the Ministry of Finance decree. We will substitute the project that was not executed with the one that was finally executed 2016. So the governance, the documentations of this underlying is actually very transparent, is available. So there is a specific list that we provide in a Ministry of Finance decree. I think that would be clear. The third question from Pak Taufik regarding the government quite massive issuance in government bonds and Sukuk. As you know, that at the 2016 budget, the deficit is 2.15% of GDP, and for that we have to issue, in terms of government bonds, around 327 trillion Indonesian rupiah, or close to 28 billion US dollar. And for that, around 76% of the 327 trillion, we will issue both conventional bonds and Sukuk bonds in Indonesian denominations in domestic markets, and around 24% in international bonds. So before that, we only issue normally 20% in international bonds in international market. We also realized that liquidity in the domestic market, also we have to be careful. That is why in the original strategy, we increased the portions of international issuance to 24%, and we will monitor the liquidity in our domestic market. If necessary, we can increase the portion of international bonds up to 30%, meaning these portions will not crowd out, will not compete with bonds issuance in domestic market. So that is number one. Number two, why do we issue in 70% in domestic market, in Indonesian rupiah denominations? Because currently the outstanding debt of Indonesia, 56% is in Indonesian rupiah, while 44% in foreign denominations. The government cannot afford to issue all in foreign currency, because then we will be exposed to foreign currency, which there is a risk if there is a volatility in currency. Meaning our strategy is trying to find a balance, not crowding out, also protecting the government not to overexpose in terms of foreign currency. 40% exposure is quite high. The objective of the government is also slowly to decrease these portions to a little bit less than 44%. That is the number two reasons why we're issuing around more than 70% in Indonesia. Number three, as I mentioned, loan is not a major source of financing for Indonesia because of the limited number of multilateral, bilateral. With the size of Indonesia, with a big demand around 28 to 30 billion, I don't think multilateral, bilateral can fulfill our needs. Number two, also, that Indonesia becoming becoming a middle income countries also, the availability of what we call cheaper financing. I forgot the terminology, but basically in the past you can easily an ODA loan, which is cheaper because you're in a low income country. But as you move to a middle income country, normally becomes limited for the availability of the ODA loan for Indonesia. That is why also we have to rely more on a broader source of financing. Bonds issuance is the source of financing. With a broader investor base, we can always find instruments and currency mix to allow us to increase the type of investor that we can rely on, instead of relying on a selected small number of multilateral and bilateral. Certainly, we will always monitor to make sure that we are not overcrowding in the domestic market, especially for private needs. We are willing to increase foreign currency bonds or even to increase our loan issuance. We work very closely with central bank to make sure this. Regarding corporate bonds, we understand in Indonesia, government bonds is more advanced in terms of volume and also frequency in issuance. Sovereign bonds in Indonesia has been paving the way for corporate bonds issuance in many cases. Government bonds issuance in US dollar is to pave the way so that the corporate can have a benchmark and then they can issue in US dollar. 3 years ago, the government issued euro-denominated bonds. The purpose is to finance our budget deficit, but also to pave the way so that corporate also then have a benchmark, then they can issue euro-denominated bonds. Government of Indonesia issue samurai bond in Japanese yen, also benchmark, and then later on so that there's a reference for corporate if they want to issue or to tap in Japanese investors. So that is how the government is looking so far, beside financing, but also paving the way, giving some benchmark for corporate to issue bonds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Robert. We are now at the end of the session 2 innovations in Sukuk. Let us, as usual, show our appreciation to the 3 panel members. I now hand over the session to the MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and may we have all the panelists remain on stage. And we kindly request to Dr. Robert Pakpahan, the Director General of Budget Financing and Risk Management, Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, for presenting the souvenirs to the panelists and the discussion chair, and followed by a group photo session. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm big hand to our speakers. Well, this is the end of our session. Before we continue to the next session, we would like to invite our guests to proceed the refreshment. To be informed that lunch has been served and provided in Exhibition Hall A, and you are kindly requested to be here again at 2 p.m. for the next session. And we also kindly request to all of you, the participants of this conference, to fill the questionnaire and submit to our staffs at the registration desk. Thank you, and please enjoy the lunch.
Bapak kalau udah pakai ini keluar ruangan. Bawa pen orang jadi diundang ke sini. Ada headset lain nggak? Kalau misal bawa berminat ada tema yang menarik. Yang mana sih? Yang bawah. Tanya ada hard copy-nya ya? Kertas. Enggak, kita paperless. Iya, Pak. Iya, iya. Yang tadi yang Pak kasih itu sama? Iya, ini. Oh, sama itu. Ya, itu. Oh, yang sore semua bisa.
Ah, itu dia ternyata aku lupa dia bawa headset di situ.
Cik, cik, cik. Ah, aman 5. Ya, kita boleh. gunting. Saya enggak. Tadi lagi tuh. Yang materi. Itu maksud saya. Berapa giga ini? Mas ini datang lagi ya? Apa namanya ini? Hah? Halim. Datang lagi ya? Yang berapa lagi, Mas?
Aku tahu, cuma kayaknya udah nyambut.